What does sustainable marketing look like in 2025? And are we talking about environmentally sustainable or personally sustainable? In fact, we're talking about both on this week's episode of Search with Candour, and I'm joined by the one and only Leah Hart.
I think most people think about sustainable marketing like these campaigns that are highlighting sustainable features of a product or company. The traditional greenwashing. Oh, all of a sudden your packaging's green and it's made out of cardboard and you have pictures of leaves on it. An average ChatGPT query uses something like 20 times the amount of energy that your average Google query does. But there are things that you have to think about beyond just, oh, how much carbon dioxide are you producing to get these wrong answers from ChatGPT? I am a plain text email marketing evangelist. There are just so many studies and so much data that show that you get better deliverability rates and people trust it more and they're not feeling like they're bombarded by ads and your stuff's not getting sent to spam. I really think being transparent and human and just communicating clearly about your needs as a human is the best way to build relationships with people and have a career where you're respected for who you are and you're leading by example. I highly recommend taking every single one of your paid days off. Just take them. Even if you're not going anywhere, you don't have any plans, just take your time off. It's so important. I'm taking a mental health day. Putting words to something and kind of making it more normalized can go a long way.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Search with Candour. I am your host, Jack Chambers Ward, as always, and this is the podcast where I interview the best and brightest minds across SEO and digital marketing. This week, I am joined by the one and only Leah Hart. We're talking about two different kinds of sustainability: environmentally sustainable marketing and what marketing strategies look like when they're actually genuinely eco-focused and not doing some sort of greenwashing that is very common with quite a lot of marketing strategies, let's be honest, and also personal sustainability. What you, your teammates, your colleagues, your co-workers, your friends can do to not burn yourself out and keep yourself going and sustainable in your career as well. If you are listening to this on the Monday it's released, I am actually doing my charity MMA fight this Friday, the 21st of November, 2025. I've put a link in the show notes if you do want to donate. There's my Just Giving page there. Hugely appreciate the people that have already supported me. It means so much. I've been on quite a journey over the last 6 months or so, to say the least. Been a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and I can't believe we're finally coming towards the end of it now in November, having spoken at Brighton SEO last month and now coming to the next big event, which is, my charity MMA fight. The charity I'm supporting, by the way, is called Norfolk Clubhouse. They're a local mental health charity based here in Norwich. And they do some amazing work helping people find purpose again in their lives and really motivate people and help people dealing with things like depression and anxiety and lots of other mental health issues. Something I can definitely relate to myself, having had my own struggles, and I'm sure plenty of you can relate to it as well. So with that in mind, please do go and check out the link in the show notes. Of course, there'll be links in the show notes for absolutely everything. If you want to go and follow my guest, Leah, if you want to go and check out the rest of the episodes of the podcast, and if you want to support me and my endeavors for charity and getting fit and healthy for a charity MMA fight, the link will be in the show notes and video description there as well. If you haven't already, please do like and subscribe, of course, as well. I hugely appreciate everyone who does that. Leave a comment either on Spotify or on YouTube as well. I hugely appreciate anyone who lets me know if they're enjoying the show, lets me know what kind of guests and topics they want to see on future episodes. Any of that sort of interaction hugely helps basically highlight the show and the podcast to other people looking for SEO podcasts. So I would very much appreciate if you would like and subscribe, hit the notification bell on YouTube, or follow and rate on things like Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. Anyway, all of that out of the way, without any further ado, here is my fantastic conversation about the two types of sustainable marketing with the brilliant Leah Hart. My guest this week has nearly a decade of experience in digital marketing across SEO, web design, paid ads, and social media. She is the integrated digital marketing specialist and SEO specialist at Forefront, and we share a passion for living sustainably and vegan junk food. Welcome to the show, Leah Hart.
Hi, thank you. I didn't know you were vegan, Jack. That's really cool.
I'm technically not vegan. I'm a lifelong vegetarian. I grew up vegetarian, but I mostly eat vegan these days. As
That's
much as I can,
awesome.
basically.
That's
I'm trying
awesome.
to be as environmental and animal conscious as I can, basically. And yeah, raised vegetarian by my parents, so have eaten meat like twice in my entire life, both by accident. And yeah, my wife is lactose intolerant, so we end up being mostly vegan most of the time anyway. So there you go.
How cool. That's
Yeah.
very
How about you?
exciting.
What's your vegan origin story there?
So I went vegan in 2012, kind of just on a whim. I wasn't really vegetarian before that, but I'd always been environmentally conscious. And a friend of mine was like, if you're eating meat, you're kind of missing a big part of all of this. I was like, oh, that makes sense. So yeah, I've been vegan since 2012.
Nice. I was just having this conversation with another former guest and an SEO, Josie Rudolph, as well, who's also vegan. We're like, yeah, a lot of us talk about this environmental stuff. A lot of us talk about sustainability, and a lot of people continue eating meat, and it is a pretty big factor. And we're not going to be talking about the meat industry this week. Don't worry, we're not suddenly going to spin off from SEO
Not
and talk
this
about the meat
show.
industry. But we are talking about sustainability, right? And I love the angle you brought with this discussion, because I've talked about some sustainable stuff, specifically the episode I did with Matt Tutt a few months ago, talking about how to be greener on the internet, how to do web design greener, and all that kind of stuff. We're going to tackle a lot of that stuff. And I love your little addition of being personally sustainable as well, in terms of your own resources, your own energy and stuff, right? And I think that's a really nice kind of balance that a lot of people kind of don't talk about a lot, if that makes sense. It feels like a nice little combination. So I appreciate you coming with the topic there.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
Cool. So let's kick things off. I guess we'll start with the environmental stuff. We'll start with the bigger picture, and then we'll kind of zoom in a bit more personal later on. And I guess I'll kick things off with, how do you kind of define a sustainable marketing? How do you have that conversation? How do you kind of frame that in your own mind when you come to approach a sustainable marketing campaign versus a non-sustainable one?
That's a great question. So I think there are all kinds of ways that you can think about this. I think most people think about sustainable marketing like these campaigns that are highlighting sustainable features of a product or company. Kind of the traditional greenwashing, like, oh, all of a sudden your packaging's green and it's made out of cardboard and you have pictures of leaves on it. So I think that's what a lot of people think about. The way I think about sustainable marketing is more like the behind the scenes stuff. Like, as a marketer, how do you make your work sustainable? So I'm thinking about things like using renewable energy to power your servers, and what kind of load do your assets have? All of these images and text and everything that we're sending around the internet have a very real environmental cost. Like, it takes energy to send these things around the world. And so how do you make that more efficient? How do you make that more sustainable? And that's the kind of stuff that I'm thinking about when I talk about sustainable marketing.
Yeah, for sure. I think, obviously, unfortunately, it's going to start the drinking game early. We're going to have to talk about AI and LLMs at some point. But before we get to that, I think a lot of people kind of underestimate how long there have been massive banks of servers that run the internet, and all of the cables and all of the just sheer amount of actual physical hardware and infrastructure that requires power, that keeps us doing what we're doing in digital marketing, right? That's powering, like you said, the servers that run our websites, the computers that allow us to do our jobs, the microphones and cameras that we're recording into right now. All of this stuff adds up. And I think a lot of us in SEO are kind of aware of some of it. Like, you use an example there of the servers being a great example. I think when it comes to things like web hosting, when you're picking a host, when you're thinking about, oh, where should I next build my website, there is pretty easy ways of checking whether they use renewable resources and sustainable energy, right? And I think for me, that's often where we kind of stop thinking about it. It's just like, okay, cool, web hosting done, tick the box, problem solved, right? And then you don't really think about the next layer onto that. And like you said, you get into a lot of greenwashing and stuff with plenty of products and plenty of companies who suddenly want to claim they're also eco-friendly and stuff like that. And I think we're moving in the right direction. Do you think, Leah? I feel like we're moving in the right direction. Maybe I'm being too optimistic. I don't know.
I think we're moving in the right direction in terms of just the fact that more people are thinking about this. Like, I'm having more conversations recently about sustainability outside of the kind of traditional things that people think about, like recycling and composting. And so I'm having more conversations about sustainability as it relates to a wider variety of things, which I definitely think is a move in the right direction. In terms of the actual digital marketing world and industry, like you said, we're going to have to talk about AI at some point. And so if you think about it that way, I don't know that we're moving in the right direction yet. We're moving in this direction where we're consuming huge amounts of power and computing resources for AI, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I love AI. I use it every day. But there are things that you have to think about beyond just like, oh, ChatGPT gives me the wrong answer sometimes. It's like, okay, how much carbon dioxide are you producing to get these wrong answers from ChatGPT? So yes and no is the answer to, do I think we're moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I had a feeling that was kind of where I was going as I started that question. And I think even we've seen, I know Sam Altman from OpenAI talked about how much the please and thank yous, the notorious, especially us
Mm-hmm.
Brits being the notoriously polite, kind of just adding that in because it feels appropriate. Or maybe you're scared of the robot overlords taking over and you just want to make sure they're on their good side when the apocalypse happens. But that ends up costing quite a lot of resources to actually process a few extra words, because that all adds up over time, right? As soon as you're putting in, so
Mm-hmm.
you and I are doing multiple prompts every single day, and we're both doing please and thank you at the beginning of every single prompt, then that adds up pretty quickly, and that suddenly becomes. I guess we talk about kind of the numbers in marketing a lot, and like, oh, Google deals with trillions of searches or billions of searches, and you talk about small percentages. Those numbers are still absolutely astronomically big, even when you're talking about small percentages. So, like you said, when we talk about AI and you're doing things at scale, that kind of matters. That kind of all adds up. And I guess the next question I have is thinking more about how you would kind of find the right kind of companies, I guess. How do you dodge those companies that are just trying to toe that company line and try to look good and actually put their money where their mouth is, or put the money where the environment is, I guess is the better question.
Yeah. Well, I think for better or worse, we are all walking around with supercomputers in our pocket. Like, it's pretty easy to find the answers to any question you might have within a few minutes. So I think we've moved past the idea of like standing in the supermarket, just agonizing over whether or not to buy a product because you don't know if you can believe the sustainability claims. It's pretty easy to find out. Again, there are so many different ways to look at this question. So if we're thinking about like, I'm trying to make a purchase, how do I know if this company that I'm trying to buy from is actually walking the walk instead of just talking the talk on sustainability? Um, there are a few things that I look for personally. I think everyone's kind of pet factors for sustainability are going to be a little bit different. But I look for things like, are they donating to reforestation efforts or ocean cleanups? Are they committed to sustainable, renewable energy? Either they're directly powered by it or they're buying offsets. Those are the kind of things that are easy to look up and people typically talk about on their company website if it's something that they're doing. I try to stay away from, again, when I'm buying products and I'm looking at the marketing of a product, things like eco-friendly and biodegradable. I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. Um, yeah, I actually used to be an ambassador for a litter cleanup program that will remain nameless. And they were all excited because they sent all of their ambassadors these biodegradable plastic bags. I'm like, it's that just means that it breaks down into microplastics faster. Like that it's not compostable. It's still plastic. It just breaks down into microplastics even faster. So that's not actually something that I'm super jazzed about. Um, so yeah, kind of knowing what you're looking for goes a long way. And like I said, everyone's kind of pet factors are going to be different, but those are the things that I look for.
Yeah, for sure. I think biodegradable is such a brilliant example of it sounds good, but actually when you look into it, and I think there is a lot of that kind of thing. Funnily enough, having a conversation with a friend the other day about how different countries define different things and how different
Mm-hmm.
cultures will define different things. You may have something different for a classification in the US than we have here in England compared to parts of Europe and the regulations that they have as well. And biodegradable and eco-friendly are maybe not legally protected terms, so you can just kind of throw it on packaging and hope for the best. Whereas certain terms are legally protected in certain areas, so you have to really kind of be aware of what actually matters, and they're not just kind of, oh, we'll throw a biodegradable and then hope for the best, compared to compostable, which is exactly like we used for my other podcast. I was making some merchandise and stuff. We printed some t-shirts, and I got them all locally done with like anti-sweatshop stuff and all that kind of thing, trying to be as, again, eco-friendly as possible, eco-positive clothing and all that kind of stuff, and then also using compostable like t-shirt bags and stuff like that. And that's when I kind of became aware, as you were saying, about the biodegradable versus compostable side of things, because it sounds like they're the same thing, but they are definitely not. And the company we went with, called No Issue, had a very specific thing, was like, this is our messages, these are completely compostable, give it a couple of weeks in your compost bin and it'll be gone, kind of thing. And they're reusable as well. They have the little like reusable tape stuff as well that is all then also compostable. It's like, this is what I need, this is what I need. I don't need biodegradable packaging. So even at a small scale, there's no excuse, in my opinion, because this is a tiny little podcast I do with my friends where we printed a few dozen t-shirts. If I can do that, then bigger companies should be able to do that as well, right?
Totally. And I've heard of No Issue. They're a good brand. There are a few, oh, of course, I'm blanking on them now, and it's not important, but there are a few really good um, compostable and reusable packaging brands like that. That's great. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, not sponsored by No Issue, just a legit customer of them. Just saying. And I guess from the other side of it, are there any red flags rather than the green flags that you think we need to avoid? Because I think, again, stuff like biodegradable, people trying to use those tricky terms will try and get away with stuff as much as they can.
Yeah, so for sure, things like eco-friendly and biodegradable that don't actually mean anything. Also, if they make a claim either on their packaging or on their website and you dig into a little bit and you can't really find the details, that's a red flag for me, because generally if companies are investing in these kind of sustainability initiatives, they're very happy to talk about it because they've made these big investments and it's something that they really care about, and it's probably pretty central to their brand and how they think about themselves. So if you dig into it and you just can't really find the details of what exactly they're doing, that's a red flag for me. Another one that I see sometimes is companies will kind of brag on the sustainability initiatives of their partners or affiliates or other companies
Mm.
that they're working with. And it's like, but you're not doing that. They're doing that and you're just working with them. So don't ride on the coattails. So that's another thing. But again, all of these things are discoverable with a few minutes on your iPhone standing in the supermarket or wherever you are deciding to make these purchases. There, if if these things are real, that the company actually cares about and is actually investing in, it's usually pretty easy to find the information.
Yeah, definitely. One that always bugs me is, we will plant a tree for you to counteract your carbon emissions. I'm like,
Mm.
trees don't appear out of nowhere. You don't just put a tree in the ground and it starts sucking up all this magical carbon dioxide. Like, that's not how that works. And like, cool, you'll offset this in 10 to 20 years, I guess. Brilliant. Thanks so much. Like, that's not actually as effective. It sounds good. We'll plant a tree for you. But actually, like you said, when you look into the stats, when you look into the data, that's kind of not how things work. And I think a lot of companies get away with that kind of stuff because we don't have time to look that up. You don't have you need to make that purchase, you need to make that decision right there and then, or they can, I don't know, again, kind of greenwash their way out of a lot of trouble, as plenty of big
Mm-hmm.
companies do.
Do you think there is a kind of, I'm almost like you said, the access to data that we have now is a positive thing for consumers to be able to call out companies like that, right? I've seen plenty of activists and celebrities and stuff going out. Most recently, I saw Ed Sheeran talk about how he doesn't use his private jet. He does not own a private jet, like so many other. I think he made, was it 2022 or 2023? He made more money in a calendar year than any musician has ever made in the history of music. Like he's
Wow.
indescribably rich, like multi millionaire, if not a billionaire, probably. But he was like, I don't believe, his wife is an environmental activist, and so he's like, I don't believe in private jets. I will get a train if I have to. I will fly in normal economy class or whatever. I was like, good for you, Ed Sheeran. Good for you. Like actually standing by your values as much as you can. I appreciate that when you get a public face of something saying something like that, you can kind of reinforce a lot of theories I think people have, like, oh yeah, private jets, that, what a crazy concept, isn't that weird?
Right. I think that's a really good example too, because some of the pushback that I've heard about marketing and sustainability is like, okay, well, that's all well and good, but you can't do that at scale. Like, it just doesn't make sense if you're running like a large company, or, our demands just don't really fit with these sustainability efforts. And it's like, I don't know, like if you're a touring musician who's traveling around the world and you can make that work on, public trains and airline flights, like I have a feeling you can make it work if it's really important to you. So the whole like, oh, well, sustainability doesn't work at scale, or it just, the numbers don't work out. It's like, I think there's a way to make it work out, no matter whether you're a solopreneur buying a dozen, t-shirt shipping packages, or oops, just smacked my microphone, or a huge multinational company trying to enact these sustainability efforts. I think there's a way to make it work if you really care about it.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you think are some of those, I guess, the big challenges people face when they're trying to do sustainable marketing? Do you think there are common things, like you said, that apply to both small and big businesses, or does it kind of shift as you scale as well?
I think there are common things to think about, regardless of the size of your business. Again, like we were talking about, you can host your site on a renewably powered server, whether you have 10 visitors a month or 10 million. That's still an option. Opting into renewable power for your office or things like that, you doing community solar programs, or again, like buying renewable energy credits. Those are things that you can do whether you're a large business or a small business. Also thinking about just the efficiency of your website and your marketing campaigns, things that are honestly good for your SEO too. Like if your site is fast and light and isn't burdened by huge images and huge downloads, that's better for your SEO as well. So those are things that you can think about kind of regardless of where you are on the spectrum. I'm sure that there are other considerations that change drastically with scale, but I think there are some really standard things that you can think about no matter where you are.
Yeah, for sure. And I know we saw this a lot, obviously, with everyone being stuck at home in the pandemic 4 or 5 years ago. At this point, there was a real kind of big conversation about working from home and working in offices and stuff, right? Do you think companies have kind of adjusted to that a little bit and kind of rethought about the investment they're putting into this kind of thing? Like from my perspective, we have a kind of like hybrid model here at Candour, where you can work in the office as much as you want or as little as you want, and you can kind of balance that. We don't have enough chairs for every single person came in at the same time, because nobody ever does that kind of thing. But there's enough of us to kind of float around a few times a week where it gets reasonably big. We get into the double digits. There's about 25 of us in total in the company. And for me, I think that is a positive step. More people being flexible, being able to work from home and not having to, you know, leave the electricity on for massive corporate office buildings and stuff like that. Obviously, Candour is a fairly small example of 25 people, but with a bigger company, I know friends of mine who work for big tech companies with thousands and thousands of employees who have an entire multi-story building. Do you think that is a conversation we need to be thinking about when it comes to that kind of investment from companies as well?
That's a really interesting question, and I think that is such a good tie between the environmental sustainability and the personal sustainability too. Because yes, there obviously are environmental benefits to not having all of your employees commute in every day and not having to power a huge, office building. I'm sure some commercial real estate developers are very sad about this development in hybrid work and work from home. But yeah,
Boo-hoo.
there are, yeah, boo-hoo. There are obvious benefits from both environmental sustainability and personal sustainability. People aren't burnt out. People aren't, commuting hours every day. People are getting more time with their family and getting to do things that matter to them. So I think that has huge benefits from both perspectives. And I think that a hybrid model like what you have with Candour is great, where, working from home all by yourself doesn't work for everybody. That's not how everyone works best. Some people really thrive in the in-office environment when they can, just stop by a colleague's desk and ask a question and all of that stuff. So I would hate to say like, let's get rid of offices forever. Everyone works from home, because that doesn't work for everyone. And so the kind of hybrid model is great. And I think you still see a lot of those environmental benefits because you don't have to, cover the overhead of space for all of these people to come in, and then, thinking about transportation and all of that other stuff. That's great.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're seeing a lot more, seemingly, again, being optimistic and hoping we're heading in the right direction, a lot more flexibility from employers and from companies in that way. I think you're totally right. It ties so well into the personal side of things as well. And I guess to tie it around to the marketing side of things, what are the kind of conversations you have when you're kind of pitching a sustainable approach to a campaign? If you're having a conversation with a client or with a stakeholder or whatever it is, how do you say we measure the success of this and also measure the sustainability of a campaign as well?
Sure. So I think there are two kind of distinct answers there. So if we're talking about measuring like whether or not a campaign is sustainable, you can look at things like carbon emissions and digital waste, thinking about optimizing your images and your videos, things like that. And you can also look at cost savings from energy efficiency practices. So those kind of like standard environmental sustainable KPIs. I think you can also look a little bit further, kind of down the chain. If you're working with a company that does, carbon offset or invest in reforestation or something, they might not make any specific changes to the way they run their campaigns themselves, but maybe, okay, so this campaign raises you this much money, which contributes to you donating this much to these environmental causes. That way offsets the environmental cost of the campaign itself. So there are a few ways to think about it, and I think there's a lot of nuance depending on like how the company itself is actually setting up their sustainability efforts, which I know is kind of a vague answer, and I apologize for that. But there are a lot of ways that you can think about it depending on how sustainability works within the organization that you're working with. And then another way to think about it is measuring whether a sustainability campaign is a success. And I think that is where we're going to touch back into AI search a little bit, because it's going to have to do with your brand strength and your brand trust and how much people are talking about your brand and mentioning you and talking about your brand with their friends in their Instagram DMs and things like that. So that kind of like brand strength, brand trust can grow and can be an indicator of a successful sustainability campaign. So again, 1,000 nuanced ways to think about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think you can, like you said, look at it in a few different ways. And when it comes to the brand loyalty and trust, that's kind of become the big buzzword of SEO in 2025. It's like you said, especially when it
Hmm.
comes to LLMs and AI search, we're all talking brand, we're all talking about it, and it's become such a I think I've said this on the show before, but it feels like we're kind of going back to old school marketing stuff. Feels like brands have been around for a while, folks. This is not new. Building loyalty and turning your customers into loyal customers and turning them into evangelists and nurturing customers in that way and all this kind of stuff. Something we've been doing for hundreds of years, well before the internet was a thing. This is old school marketing things. And for me, it's a weird kind of balance between the cutting edge technology stuff and then also the super basic, seemingly obvious to many of us, hopefully, who work in marketing, establishing brand and all that kind of stuff. Have you found that kind of conversation with clients, with stakeholders in that way of like, yes, we need to use AI, and yes, we can have that conversation from a sustainability point of view and from more of a, I guess, a kind of brand perspective as well?
Yeah, so those conversations are ongoing. I think the whole industry is kind of trying to figure out how to have those conversations with clients or stakeholders and how to measure success as things are changing. Um, can you repeat the question? I'm not quite sure that I got your main point there.
Yeah, sure. How do you kind of approach having those conversations with your clients, with your stakeholders? Because it can be kind of difficult sometimes, right? If you're trying to sell somebody on a sustainable kind of side of things, especially with AI, everybody's keen on scaling. Everybody's keen on making things as quick as possible, as much money as possible. But I guess have you ever experienced kind of a difficult conversation in that way and kind of balancing that with the success of like, this will work and also be sustainable?
Yes, definitely. So, one of the kind of perennial conversations that I'm always having with clients that is related to both performance and sustainability, when we're talking about email marketing, I am a plain text email marketing evangelist. There are just
Mm.
so many studies and so much data that show that you get better deliverability rates and people trust it more and they're not feeling like they're bombarded by ads and your stuff's not getting sent to spam. People are opening it and engaging with it more. Just like laundry lists of reasons why plain text emails are better. And also, they're more sustainable. They have a smaller footprint. You're not sending around, huge amounts of images and stylized text and everything. And so that's a conversation I've had with clients and stakeholders more times than I can count. And I don't always win that argument. People are very attached to their pretty stylized emails. But that's a big one that I've been having since long before anybody was talking about sustainability with AI. And now, as we are having the AI conversation, there's kind of this arms race for tools and measures and being able to stand out from the crowd and show a measure that no one else is doing yet. And I think there's a lot of like kind of give and take that has to happen there. Like the an average ChatGPT query uses something like 20 times the amount of energy that your average Google query does. And so a lot of these tools are built on doing, at scale, like hundreds of thousands of queries, thinking about like visibility, AI visibility tracking, for example. That's generally done by submitting huge amounts of queries and measuring the percentage of time that a given website shows up as a source. And done at scale, like even if we're just thinking about one company doing that kind of around the clock, like thousands of queries a day, like that adds up. And then you think about all of the other brands that are trying to do it and build their own tools. It's like, sure, this is a thing that clients are asking for. People want to know how much they're showing up in AI search. And it's a thing that you want to do and you want to develop the best one and stand apart from the crowd. But it's like, I think we need to be having these conversations about like, is this information worth the cost? Like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Are you getting information that's valuable enough to be worth what it took to get it? And are there ways that you can think about like, okay, our clients do want AI visibility testing, for example. Maybe that's something that we do on like a monthly basis where we just kind of have these benchmarks and checkpoints, but we're not running it every day. We're not going to be able to tell you today you showed up in 45% of searches instead of 47. Like, how can we still accomplish the goals that we need to accomplish and serve our clients and, move forward and be on the leading edge of the industry, but also think critically about, like, maybe minimum viable product is a way to think about it. Like, how much can we do this, or how little can we do this, so that we're still getting the information that we need, but we're not falling behind, but we're not wasting resources either. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've seen a lot of people talk about the way they use ChatGPT, and I think your minimum viable product thing is a really interesting point, because I see a lot of people doing stupid stuff, like real dumb stuff that you can just very easily get from a Google search or
Mm-hmm.
something very similar. You don't need to use AI for everything. And like you said, if you kind of have if you go in with a goal in mind rather than just blindly kind of poking around, you can very quickly narrow it down, rather than, oh, it ended up being 10, 15, 20. So I had to reword my prompt 3 different times and ever so slightly adjust this and then that. And I think, as much as the prompt engineer job title on LinkedIn drives me absolutely mental, it is kind of a thing to be aware of, like what you're actually typing. I have found and learned how to do more specific prompts to actually get what I need, or ask more specific questions to get a correct answer, rather than the vague kind of thing I guess we're kind of used to from Google, if that makes sense. Ben, I turned 35 later this year, and I remember the times before the internet, right? I remember early days of search engines and stuff like that, where you could type in really, really broad searches and still get decent results. And we're obviously getting more and more specific, more narrowed down, zero volume searches and all that kind of stuff has been much more popular over the last decade. And I think even more so now with ChatGPT, you need to be aware of what you're searching at. Exactly as you said there, Leah, like, you don't want to be wasting resources and searching essentially for the same thing 3 or 4 different ways, when you could get it once in one search if you just plan it out ahead of time and don't waste your time and waste all the resources, right?
Right. And I think this is an area where we can really get a lot of value from each other. I've been really up to my eyebrows kind of in LinkedIn recently, but that's because there's
Haven't we
so
all?
much, yeah, there's so much good information flying around. Like, I've gotten so much value from the results of other people's AI visibility testing, for example. Like, there's all of these infographics going around, like, oh, these are the sources that AI is pulling from the most. And it's like, I didn't have to do any testing to benefit from that information. So kind of sharing what we all learn collectively is a great way for us to move forward all together as an industry, and also be a little bit more responsible with our resources by sharing information instead of everyone having to test it out for themselves. We can all benefit and, keep the environmental cost of these things down.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really interesting way of thinking about it. 'Cause I think a lot of us think of doing original work and pushing the boundaries as kind of an aspirational goal, or going against plagiarism, obviously, and trying to make original, unique content. But I've said it many times before. The thing I love about the SEO community and the brilliant marketing community, especially places like LinkedIn and lots of other kind of Slack groups and things like that, you can get some amazing support. I mean, like, oh yeah, I've already done that work. We've already done this study. I've already got a model that does this, or a Python script that already does this. You don't need to go and do it from scratch again. You can stand on the shoulders of those giants, so you then don't have to repeat the work and use the resources multiple times, right? And I think it's a really positive thing for our community to be working together and helping each other and leading that way when it comes to not only saving you time and all that kind of stuff when it comes to your workday, but also the resources that go into that. If you've already built a prompt that does a particular thing for email marketing, then I don't need to do the same thing again. We can just have a conversation and be like, oh, Leah, could I borrow your thing that allows me to do this particular task? Like, yeah, perfect, brilliant. And that saves everybody time, saves resources, and we're all better friends at the end of the day, hopefully.
Yeah. And it's better for personal sustainability. Imagine that.
Exactly. Let's get into the personal stuff. Let's talk about, I guess, like managing your own resources, right? Because I think you're spot on. That is a very good example of having a look at what other people have done before you go and try and do it yourself. And I come from a physics and science background, so I am very much aware of do your research before you start doing work. I am a big research nerd before I get into a particular task or a project. I will make sure I'm aware of what other people have done before I start, because like you said, people might have already done 80, 90, 100% of the work. Oh, somebody's already done that. I don't need to do that. I could go and do this study, but turns out somebody's already done it. For you, is there a kind of similar approach to your personal sustainability? Are you as aware of your own resources as you are of the environmental resources as you go about your daily life, I guess?
That's a very fun question. And I think it's something that I am working on, work in progress. I've probably spent more time thinking about environmental resources than my own personal resources. But it's a thing that I think they lead into each other. If you're thinking about, finite resources and how to make things work more efficiently, that thought experiment happens at all levels. So thinking about personal sustainability and like, okay, I don't need to put in these 100 hours of effort on something that someone else has already done, that I can just make this connection, and then we're both happier for it. They're excited someone's using their tool. I get to save the effort. We have this cool connection and we both benefit. And that's so much more efficient. But also thinking about things like just managing your own time day to day. That's a big area that I am actively working on right now, because I'm a people pleaser. Like if my project managers are like, "Hey, we need this by end of day by the time you log off," I'm like, "Okay, I'll do anything I can to make it happen, even if that means I'm up late at night finishing stuff." And that's not a great way to have a sustainable career. Working yourself, burning the candles at both ends is not the way to have a long and fruitful career. And that's something that I've been putting a lot more thought into recently.
Yeah.
Let me stop rambling.
No, you're absolutely spot on. Like I'm also a people pleaser. I'm totally guilty of that as well. And while I will, again, kind of preach the good word about environmentalism and being climate aware and all that kind of stuff, I am totally guilty of just absolutely burning myself out. And I was having this conversation with my wife literally a couple of days ago. I kept getting into the habit of doing extra work, not Candour work, but like other podcast stuff, or working on planning for other bits and other creative projects I'm working on. And by the time I sat down, I'd be starting at like 9 p.m. and I'm never productive at that time. I'm going to be going to bed in a couple of hours. I'm better off resting and then coming back to it and spending a proper go at it at the weekend or a different day or whatever. And I had to literally have this conversation with my wife of like, if I bring the laptop downstairs, tell me to stop. You need to reinforce this into my brain so I don't burn myself out, because I'm so guilty of doing this. And like you said, it's always a work in progress, right? None of us are going to be perfect and perfectly organized. I mentioned earlier, my ADHD is very bad for that time management kind of thing. So I always get stuck in hyper focus, or like, I have to finish this thing by today. Like you said, you get the request from the manager or the project manager. We kind of need that as soon as possible. Like, right, I will work myself to death so you have this by 5 p.m. Or you could just say, I don't have capacity. Is tomorrow okay? And you can kind of have that. Most people, hopefully, your colleagues are nice and they will be happy to have that conversation.
Totally. Yes, I've had to do the same thing. I've been trying to implement like a quitting time, and it's not always 5 p.m. Realistically,
Yeah,
sometimes I am working a little bit later. But having that quitting time where, the alarm goes off on my phone or whatever, and I'm like, okay, this is it. And managing that kind of happens from both sides too. One is managing your time during the day leading up to that point so that you're making the most efficient use of your time, so that you're not stuck feeling like you need to work past quitting time. And a tool that I have been using that I love, I'm a little bit embarrassed of how dependent I am on it actually, is Reclaim AI. It's an AI scheduler. I put in my tasks every morning and it finds slots for them on my calendar. And if one takes longer than it needs to, it moves stuff around. Um, it's very similar to Motion, which is, I think, one that
Yep.
has been getting more publicity, but it's the same thing, just cheaper. Sorry, Motion. Reclaims my tool. But it's incredible. And I notice such a difference the days that I use it and the days that I don't use it in what I'm able to get done and how efficient I am. And the fact that I can log off at my quitting time and go have a life and take care of myself as a person and not feel like I need to work late into the night to finish that. And the other thing, like you said, is having that relationship with your team where you can be like, hey, listen, this isn't going to get done today. Like, can this be pushed to tomorrow? Can we reallocate something to somebody else so that I can work on this if it really needs to be done ASAP? So having those relationships with your team and the discipline to be able to say, like, listen, no, it's not going to get done today. What can we do with that no? So it's kind of working on that from two angles. And again, totally a work in progress.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of positive, again, I feel like we're moving in the right direction from the people I interview on the show and friends I talk to in the industry. A lot of agencies and companies are being very positive with this kind of stuff. From your experience, what are those kind of conversations you need to have if you are a team leader or if you're part of a group in an agency or in an in-house team to kind of cultivate that culture of personal sustainability, of managing yourself and being aware of what's going on with your colleagues?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question. And a lot of people think, like, oh, I'm not like in a leadership position. Like, I don't have the capacity to influence my team in that way. And I really think that there are so many ways that you can lead without being a leader with a capital L. And I think one of the best ways to do that is just kind of be transparent and vocal about what you're doing. Like, hey, I'm kind of stressed today. I'm going to log off a little bit early. Like, you're giving the people the information that they need. Like, okay, Leia's not going to be at her desk for the next little bit. But also it's saying like, hey, I am stressed and so I'm taking care of myself. Or, hey guys, I'm going to take a mental health day tomorrow. You could very easily just say like, hey, I'm taking the day off. I'm not going to be in. I'm taking a sick day, whatever. But saying like, I'm taking a mental health day, putting words to something and kind of making it more normalized can go a long way. A few weeks ago in a team meeting at Forefront, we have morning meetings we call Scrum. They usually only last about 15 minutes. It's just like to get on the same page because we're a remote agency. But a few weeks ago, I was like, hey guys, I'm taking an extended lunch because I have a therapy appointment. And I had so many of my colleagues message me afterwards and be like, thank you so much for sharing that, for like saying, that you're taking the time because you have to go to therapy. Like, yeah, like I was amazed that that was so impactful, but also it totally makes sense because I think a lot of us came up in this era of like, oh, to be professional, you don't share your weaknesses and you don't show your vulnerabilities and you put up this very professional kind of non-porous front like there's nothing can get through. And it's like, I don't know. I really think being transparent and human and just communicating clearly about your needs as a human is the best way to build relationships with people and have a career that where you're respected for who you are and you're leading by example. And yeah, just communicating honestly and clearly about your needs and how you're taking care of yourself is a great way to just kind of push that culture change within your agency or workplace.
Yeah, definitely. I think talking about therapy being a really nice little connector here. I know it's been a big discussion again for a lot of people coming out of COVID as a whole kind of other discussion. We were talking about the working from home versus working in the office side of things. I think just being aware of how other people like to work in your team and how they like to communicate and the situations that they're in. Like you said, having an open, transparent communication. We do the exact same thing at Candour. We have a kind of team catch up of like, how is everyone? Do you need help on any tasks? Is there any delays, any stress points, anything, any successes you need to talk about? Like, do you want to shout about a successful campaign or whatever it is? That kind of thing, having that open floor to kind of discuss it. And like you said, it can be something as simple as, I'm going to need a longer lunch break because I'm going to therapy. Have you kind of been able to set those boundaries in that way? I mean, you mentioned the end time thing as well. Are there any other kind of things where you found success in having that kind of conversation with your team and with your colleagues?
Totally. So one of the things that I have found kind of recently, again, I'm also 35. Some of the things I'm just discovering now are truly shocking to me, but yeah, I've just realized like if you take care of your team, they'll take care of you. So, just being kind to the people you work with and checking in with them and seeing if you can help them, or if there's anything that you can take off their plate when you have the capacity. That stuff comes back to you with interest, like being kind to your team, taking care of them, seeing how they're doing, communicating when you need something or when you have capacity to help. Again, just having real human relationships with the people that you work with, it really goes a long way. And also thinking about working in a team, again, things that I've realized more recently than I care to admit. Not everyone's brain works the way that mine does. Like, there are things that I like working on that other people hate. There are things that I find exciting and challenging that are just busy work for other people. And so having conversations about like, hey, working on this excites me and working on this drains me. I think if people had those kind of open conversations with their team, you would find like, oh, the things that drain me might excite you. And so we can kind of shift these things around, and we're all working on more, a higher percentage of tasks that give us energy instead of drain it from us. And so just that kind of collaboration and understanding like, okay, not every task feels the same to every person, and you can kind of share the load and share the excitement that way.
Yeah, definitely. I love that kind of thinking about what excites you and what gives you energy. It's always the kind of extroverted, introverted kind of conversation. And we actually had I don't know if you've experienced this before, Leah. There's I can't remember the official name of it. I think it has a few different names. We did a discovery. There's like a color chart thing for different personality types, and you get like fiery red and sunny yellow, and there's blue, red, green, and yellow, and that depends on the kind of person you are. Depends on the kind of communication style you want. And I am very, very blue. I am very data driven, research driven. I will take my time, all that kind of stuff. Yellows tend to be more personable and kind of energized by social stuff. Greens are kind of motivators and kind of helpers and supporters and things like that. And the reds are the leaders, the ambitious, the impatient, all that kind of stuff. I am incredibly patient. And to contrast that with my boss, our SEO director, Mark Williams-Cook, he's incredibly red. And I have learned to not waste Mark's time by doing my usual thing of waffling like I would on a podcast. Oh, I will spend 5 minutes asking a particular question or doing an answer. Instead, I could just be like, no problem, sort it tomorrow. Yep, okay. Just like keep it as short and simple as possible. And I don't know if you've ever done that before. I had a kind of conversation about different communication styles and, like you said, what tasks give you guys energy and stuff like that. Oh, you really like doing technical audits. I can't think of anything worse. Oh, you really like doing, you've got an email marketing client. Maybe I can help you out with that instead. And I find, especially in agency life, where you've got multiple people with multiple skills, being able to balance that and rejig some of that stuff has become really important for us as an agency to keep everyone motivated and engaged, right?
Totally. I love that. I haven't heard of that particular test with the colors. I'm reminded of Hogwarts houses. The colors don't perfectly line up, but
am I being too British now? Is this what's going on? Just living the stereotype.
You just can't see my full Harry Potter collection behind me on my bookshelf here. You just tickled a little piece of the Hogwarts nerd inside of me.
I'm
Yeah, so
a
at
blue, and I was a Ravenclaw, so it makes sense, right? That's on
I'm a
brand.
Hufflepuff, but I don't think I'm a yellow based on your description. So that's interesting. Yeah, at Forefront we did something similar. Everyone, as they're onboarded, we take this like personality assessment, and then we meet with the leaders of the team to like discuss our results as we're onboarded, and those are shared with the team. We also have like kind of regular touch bases about like, hey, how do you want to receive feedback, or what kind of feedback sits well with you and what kind doesn't. Like there are some folks where if I'm QAing a task, for example, like going over and making sure everything looks good, some people really need that in a video, like a Loom, where I'm going through and saying like,
Mm,
hey, we should fix this and this needs to be removed, and here's this typo we found. Whereas other people really work best with just like a few short notes in our project management software. So we're always having these conversations about like, hey, how best do we communicate with each other? And I think that's super important and maybe a little bit underrated, especially in an agency setting, or really in a remote or hybrid work setting where you're not getting like face-to-face time with everybody, where you would maybe learn these things in a real life situation. Like having this kind of foundational information about the people that you're working with is super valuable and really goes a long way for having those good working relationships.
yeah, definitely. It's called Discovery Insights is the correct term. I'll send you a link,
Discovery
Leah,
insights. Yeah,
and
thank you.
I'll put a link in the show notes as well. It's a really interesting little. I think it's based on like Jungian psychology, personality test type stuff. But we found it really helpful to, like I said, be aware of each other's. And I know some people literally put it into practice. They will have like the colors on the backs of their chairs in their office, or we were given little like foam Lego bricks, like fairly big ones, and you can stack them in the colors of like your prioritized kind of thing. So mine is, I think I'm blue, green, yellow, red. Red is my least and blue is my most. So I have my blue on top. And that can kind of even give new people or clients or whatever a rough idea of, oh, Jack likes a lot of context. If you ask me to do something, you will get better results if you give me the full picture and you spend that extra 5 or 10 minutes explaining everything. Maybe I've never worked on this client before, exactly as we were saying earlier. Oh, I get energized from this particular task, but I also have never worked on this client before. Let's have a quick call and have that conversation rather than go and read the task description on the project management software. Good luck. Like, actually, I'd be much better off if I get the context of, oh, they started the business in this year and their priorities are this and their KPIs are that and all this kind of thing. I always feel much better with like high context communication. And I think for me, I often give this kind of advice to other marketers and younger marketers as well. Like, think about the kind of things that energize you and think about the kind of things that help you do your job better. Basically, like you said, be more efficient and manage your resources. That extra 5 minutes of an introduction or with more context will save me hours of digging through internal documents or scrolling through the client's about page or whatever it is, which I've definitely done in the past. But you can just have a conversation with the project manager, with the account manager, whoever it is, and get that information really quickly. Do you have kind of similar thoughts? Do you have any kind of advice for younger marketers who are trying to do that and trying to be more aware of their own personal sustainability?
Yes, totally. Let me think about that. So I was already talking about taking care of the people you work with. I really think that goes a long way, and it might not be immediately obvious when, especially if you're new to the field and you're just getting started in an agency or in a business, and you're out to show that you're doing a good job and that you know what you're doing. Thinking about taking care of the people around you might not seem like an immediate first step, but I think that's really important. Um, I also think finding the things that you're interested in, like we were talking about, the things that give you energy, find those as quickly as you can and chase them.
Mm,
Because I think it will set you apart from the crowd. It will give you this kind of specialty or niche if you really get into like one particular area, and it will help you do more work that you enjoy. Um, let's see. I also think that drinking water is really important. Um, yeah, exactly.
always do that.
Uh, I think it's so much more important for our just like emotional health than a lot of people realize. But if you're sitting at your desk all day, drinking coffee, not drinking water, it's like it's really easy to get dehydrated. And I can kind of tell when people are dehydrated and they just like need to take a break and drink some water. And it's like, let's come back to this in 5 minutes. So this is something that I stole. I'm an avid hiker, and I would chronically get dehydrated while I was hiking. And so I had to start this, I could say drink about it. Like anytime I think about water, like, oh, there's a stream over there, or it's about to rain, or like there's a puddle. Anytime I think about water, I need to take a drink. And I do the same thing, or I try to do the same thing at work too. Anytime I think about water, I I drink, because it's really more important than you would think, and it's so easy to get dehydrated. Another one is to take all of your paid time off. I know
Oh,
that there's
yeah.
kind of this like hustle culture, which I just can't abide. But I know for a fact that in some workplaces, in some agencies, it's kind of this like badge of honor that you don't take PTO, and people feel like, oh, if I'm out of the office, I'm going to get passed over for this promotion or this opportunity or whatever. And I know that that's a very real thing in a lot of workplaces, but that's a sign that your workplace is toxic. Like if you're working in a place where it's a badge of honor to not take your time off, look for another job. I highly recommend taking every single one of your paid days off. Just take them. Even if it's just you're not going anywhere, you don't have any plans, like just take your time off. It's so important. And probably the last thing that I would say to new marketers, new people trying to get into this industry and find success, especially in the world of like remote work, is to be really intentional about finding time to get up and move. Whether that's
Mm.
like having a workout routine before work, or like on your lunch break, you stand up and you stretch, or in between your meetings, you have a stretch break. Whatever it is that works for you, find something and make it a really intentional part of your day, whether that's putting it on your calendar or setting a reminder on your phone, or whatever you need to do to make that work for you. It's another thing that's really easy to overlook. And then one day it catches up with you. You're like, oh, I haven't left my house in 3 days. I've been sitting for the last 9 hours. I can't remember the last time I ran a mile. Like it kind of sneaks up on you that all of a sudden you're not moving very much. And that's another thing that has more of an impact on your work and on your career than you might think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that ties really nicely into what you were saying earlier about having the clear end time as well, right? You can get so caught up in a project of just like, well, I'm just going to roll straight out of bed to my desk, work for as long as I possibly can, go to bed, do the same thing the next day. And then you realize, like you said, I haven't left the house in like 3 or 4 days. I should probably walk, go outside, get some air,
Yeah.
something like just anything.
Yeah, and it's real. Like it's so easy to joke about, but like that's real. I think last week I didn't leave my house for 3 days. Like, and not, I'm not like some shut-in like recluse, like scared of the world. I just, I got busy. I was working. I, got up, went to work, went to bed. It's like, man, that that's really easy to have happen to you if you're not intentional about not letting it happen to you.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've totally been guilty of that. And just the little things, like you said, like stretching or getting up and moving. I know there's some debated kind of science behind standing desks and stuff. I find it really helpful personally. It makes me far more aware of my body, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Literally like
Mhm.
shifting weight from one foot to the other, or just doing a little little stretch and just making sure you're all right. Like I'm way more aware of myself if I'm stood than I am if I'm sat down. And I find even little things like stopping to go and refill my water bottle, or go, take my cats out to the garden for 5 minutes during my lunch break or something like that, can be such a mood changer and a nice little reset for my brain, that it can make a difference to my afternoon performance. And funny enough, you mentioned hydration there as well. I think that's something I've really, really gotten into a good habit of, hopefully. Not that I'm claiming I'm an expert, but I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about how much hydration can affect both physical and mental performance. And it was like 20 to 30% difference if you are dehydrated versus fully hydrated. And like, you will be slow, your thinking time is slower, your processing time is slower, you physically move in different ways and things ache and creak and you build up more lactic acid and all this kind of tiny little things that you don't really think about, even when you're sat there for 9 hours a day. Exactly as you said, Leah, it all adds up, exactly as we were saying with the resources earlier, right? Tiny little things will build up over time and you realize, I have drunk like 200 milliliters of water all day and a coffee, and that's it. Like, yeah, I have this conversation with my wife basically every day. I have sorted out my hydration. I'm now trying to sort out my wife's hydration, and I will just check in like, how much have you drunk today? What's going on? Have you finished your water bottle yet? She's got one of those ones that like measures the amount, like you should be drinking this much kind of thing, actually on the bottle. I'm like, send me a photo of your water bowl. How's it going? Are you hydrated? I'm a nag like that, apparently.
Good for you. Good for you. I also
Well,
have one of those water bottles that has like the time on it. Like, oh, by 3 p.m. the water should be
yeah.
down to here. Yes, work in progress, but it is very important.
Cool. Well, let's kind of wrap things up. I think this is a very difficult but relevant question. Do you have any kind of personal habits or anything like that that help keep you grounded? Because, oh boy, the industry is chaos. The internet is chaos. Life is chaos in 2025. Do you have anything that you kind of use to reduce that noise and reduce that stress as much as possible that you'd recommend for everyone else?
Absolutely. So, like you said, it's not just the industry, it's the world at large. And I try to apply this both personally and professionally, where I'm very intentional about the sources I accept information from.
Mm,
Um, so, for example, I love LinkedIn. I'm reading stuff that people put on LinkedIn all the time. But there are, a handful of people who I have come to trust their work and trust their methods and stuff, where if they say, like, hey, do this or look into this or this is important, that's an action item for me and not just like an entertaining read. Um, but in my personal life too, I'm very selective about where I actually accept input from, because we're just bombarded with information all of the time. And I'm sure you've heard this, that our brains are not equipped to handle the like influx of information that we're bombarded with all day long, every day. We're just not built to handle it. And so I try to be very intentional about like kind of constricting that fire hose a little bit and only accepting information from a few key places, not to like keep myself in an echo chamber, but just to not just be slapped in the face with information all day long. Um, and I think it's important to kind of vet those sources and make sure that they're actually good, trustworthy places to get information from.
not just
But
AI
you
generated slop.
exactly, exactly. But yeah, I think that's important for personal sustainability and also sustainability in your career. Like, you don't have to accept everything that you hear, see, and read. Um, you don't have to accept everything somebody tells you. Having that kind of critical thinking and discernment and being selective about where you accept input from has helped me a lot, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if you already know this. I have a little recommendation for you for finding sources of news. It's a service called ground.news. Have you heard about this before?
No, I haven't.
So it's mostly focused on political stuff, but it does go outside of political stuff as well. And it is a way of looking at different sources who cover the same topic. So using the political side as an example, discussing a particular election, and it will tell you how they kind of lean politically in those particular news sources. You'll see everyone on the right and all these right-wing publishers are discussing it in this way, while the left-wing publishers discuss things in this way. And it does a really nice job of kind of balancing and understanding, like, okay, all the more conservative news sources are talking about this particular subject, and none of the liberal ones are talking about it. And I find that helps me kind of be aware of, like you said, be aware of where I'm getting my news, but also being aware that I'm not existing in my little liberal echo chamber, as I often do. And I think for me, it's been a really interesting kind of thing of being aware of what other people are saying about the same thing. Like I often struggle to understand how can you possibly think of it that way. I am fairly sure in my own values and beliefs and things like that. I'm always perplexed at how people can have completely opposite values to me because they seem like such a fundamental thing. But yeah, Ground News is what I'd recommend. Again, not sponsored, anything like that. Funnily enough, they sponsored a podcast I was listening to, and that's how I discovered them. So I will recommend recommend them there to go and check that out if you do want to get kind of a balanced kind of news resource kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm going to check that out right after this. That's really cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Let's round things off with some recommendations from you then, Leah. I think you already mentioned one of your tools, but let's kick things off with an actionable tip that you'd recommend for all the listeners and viewers to start doing right now.
Yeah, so this kind of ties into the last thing we were talking about. My one actionable tip for everyone is to think critically about everything you read, hear, think, and do. I think that a lot of the problems and disagreements in the world, both politically and personally and in our careers, could be at least helped by a dose of critical thinking. If people just thought about the things that they took in, thought about the things that they wanted to say before acting upon that, I think critical thinking is the most valuable skill that I learned in college. And I think it's vitally important, and the importance of it just keeps getting driven home for me. So yes, my one actionable thing you can do today is to think critically about everything you read, hear, think, and do.
Nice. I couldn't agree more. Like I said, I try and take that approach to basically everything as much as I can. Be as skeptical, be as scrutinous as you possibly can. Don't just take things at face value. And I was a conversation I was having with a friend the other day. They were like, "Oh, this person was saying bad about this particular piece of work I did," or whatever. I was like, "Right, but are they somebody you care about? Do you value their opinion? Do they matter?" And they're like, "Well, no, I don't care." I was like, "Well, then don't listen to that piece of feedback. Like that doesn't matter. Care about, your manager's feedback. If your client said it was great, then it's great. Don't care about the masses in a lot of ways. Don't get bogged down in, like we said, all that noise." And I think for me, that has been, like you said, a journey for the last
Yeah.
few years, for sure. You already mentioned Reclaim AI as a recommended tool as well. Is there anything else you want to recommend that you find particularly useful?
Yes. So this might be more interesting than useful. And there are a few of these, but it's called websitecarbon.com.
Mm.
And basically you enter in a URL and it gives you the best estimate that it can based on the information it can get about your host and things like that of the carbon footprint of your website. That has a lot to do with your traffic and your hosting and your location and all of these things. So it's not perfectly accurate. I wouldn't expect this tool to be perfectly accurate, but it can give you a pretty good idea of the actual carbon footprint of your website. And showing that to people has been kind of an eye-opener for some folks. Like, oh wow, like these things, digital marketing exists in this kind of ethereal space where you don't often touch anything. There's no like physical reality to a lot of what we do. But the fact that there is like a very real environmental cost, there's energy being spent on running your website and delivering it to people. So it can be kind of an eye-opener. And if you're trying to start a sustainability discussion at your workplace or in your agency, this can be a good place to start as kind of an icebreaker.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a really nice way to get that initial investment and buying, like being able to put data behind it, right? Rather than just having a kind of vague sustainability, environmental kind of discussion. I mean, like, actually, there are millions of websites that are more efficient and more environmentally sustainable than ours is, or congratulations, you got an A, like you're one of the most
Hmm.
environmentally conscious websites in the world. That's a very nice thing to kind of like pitch to a client as well. I know I've had that conversation before of like, okay, yeah, if you move to this particular CMS or you shift to this particular thing, almost think of it like a KPI. Like I said, it's an estimate. Don't get carried away too much, but I think there's a really positive way of putting a number behind it. I mean, like, yeah, this is actually a way of measuring this stuff rather than the kind of vacuous discussions we have a lot. Like you said, a lot of people hide behind a lot of the vacuous stuff where you can actually put a number to it. That's when you can get the conversation really started.
Totally. And like we were talking about earlier, a lot of this stuff ties into very real SEO performance metrics. Like if your website is heavy and gluttonous, it's not going to load fast. So these things are connected to very real performance KPIs as well.
Definitely, definitely. And last thing, a video, a book, an article, a podcast, whatever it is you've been enjoying recently, Leah.
Yeah. So my friends will often joke with me that I'm a computer. And for a long time, I really hated that. I really fought against it. And then recently, I picked up this book, like as a joke. I picked it up off the shelf and sent a picture to my friend. It's called Algorithms to Live By: The Computer Science of Human Decisions. And I sent this picture to my friend with the message, beep, boop, bop. And then I actually read it, and it's fascinating. So I think I'm coming around to the idea that maybe I am a computer. But it's so interesting, and it has a lot to do with the ways that you can apply principles of computer science to human decision making. I loved it. It's by Brian Christian and Tom Griffiths. There's an audiobook as well. Highly recommend. Super cool. It's a delightful little bit of nerdery.
That's what I wanted. When I thought of doing the section of recommendations, I added it at the start of the year. Delightful nerdery is exactly what I wanted. So I appreciate that. That is exactly what I wanted. And last but not least, where can people follow you? Where can people keep up with the good work you're doing in SEO, keep up with Forefront and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so really the big place where I am putting energy right now is on LinkedIn. So definitely come find me on LinkedIn. Hart Leah C is my profile. Send a connection, send a message, comment on my stuff. I would love to connect with folks. I'm not on Blue Sky or X or any of those places. Again, I'm trying to be a little bit more intentional about where I'm putting my energy. Blue Sky it's compelling. I might end up there soon, but I'm not there yet. So yeah, come find me on LinkedIn. Also, I work for an agency called Forefront, forefront.us. That's four like the number spelled out. I have lots of blog posts and stuff on there, including a relatively recent one about digital sustainability. So if you are interested in this conversation, check that out because there's a whole bunch more. It's one of the longest blog posts I've ever written. So yeah, definitely check that out, forefront.us.
Awesome. I'll put links for everything, your LinkedIn, the blog posts and everything else in the show notes so we can go and check it out. Go and follow you and keep up with the awesome work you're doing. Thank you for joining me, Leah. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jack. I really enjoyed this. I hope you have a great day.
And that wraps up this week's episode. Thank you once again to Leah for joining me. This was recorded quite a while ago. You've probably noticed I've been recording quite far in advance over the last few months or so, but we will be catching up with ourselves very, very soon. Don't worry. And yeah, I hugely appreciate Leah's insights and humor and all the brilliant conversation we had there. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did recording it as well. As I mentioned at the top of the show, links for everything to go and follow Leah and all the recommendations and resources that we mentioned throughout the episode will be available in the video description and show notes down below, no matter where you're watching or listening to this episode. And like I said at the very start, I'd hugely appreciate if you can like and subscribe and follow and all that kind of stuff. But most importantly, for me personally, if you could go to the video description or show notes down below and find the link for my Just Giving page, because this Friday on the 21st of November, I will be fighting in a cage after 8 weeks of training, kind of, but I've really been training for about 6 months now. Hopefully you've noticed how much weight I've lost. I've lost about 25 kilos over the last 6 months. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey. And by the time you next hear from me on next week's episode, I will have had my first MMA fight and will have hopefully raised over £1,000 for a local mental health charity here in Norwich, Norfolk Clubhouse, that I mentioned at the top of the episode. So if you have any pounds or pennies or dollars or euros or whatever it is to spare, please do go and check out my Just Giving page that is linked down below. I would hugely appreciate any support. And yeah, I will see you next week. Of course, I'll be back every single week, and we've got some amazing guests coming up. One of my favorite people in SEO, one of the punkest people in SEO, Aid Holder, will be coming up very, very soon in the next couple of weeks. And I adored my conversation with Aid and how to balance your own ethics and marketing and SEO and all that kind of stuff. Feels like a nice little companion piece to this episode as well. In the meantime, like I said, thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll see you next week. Have a lovely week, and perhaps next week I'll see you with a black eye or something like that. I've got plenty of bruises already. I'm just not showing them on camera. But yeah, hopefully you have a lovely week, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much.